and welcome to Solving with the Quad Formula. I hope you remember the Quad Formula. If you don't, I guess you can sing the song to yourself as you write it on the paper. Or you can do what I also tell my students, to just write it every single time you have a problem. So if you have a homework assignment for 10 problems, just write it 10 times, and sooner or later you'll get it pretty much memorized because you wrote it so many times. Okay, so I'll practice what I preach, and I will write it as well. So here it goes. So x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Yeah, and there you go. Pretty simple. All right, so let's plug in some numbers. Ooh, actually, what numbers do we plug in? Yeah, because we have b's and a's and c's, but what number do we put in those spots? So here's how you figure that out. Okay, whatever number's in front of your x squared, that's your a. Whatever number's in front of your regular plain old x, that's your b. And whichever number doesn't have a letter at all attached to it, that's your c. Pretty simple, yeah? Okay, so let's do this. Let's plug these things in. So we got x equals negative, and be careful with that because a lot of students, they see a negative b value, which is negative 6 in this problem, and they just assume that the negative that is wrote is going to belong to your b value that you're going to eventually write also. So they only write one negative sign when they plug in their negative 6, and that leads to a minor mistake, but nonetheless it's still a mistake, so be very careful. Okay, so my negative that I just wrote is from the formula, not because of negative b, but it's because of the formula. Okay, so then b says plug in negative 6, so I'll go and I'll do that also. And you're probably asking me, can I just turn that into a positive 6 already? Yeah, you could, yeah, but then you start doing things like taking steps and doing it in your head, which is fine, and it lessens the amount that you have to write, but then you might also make careless mistakes one day and put a negative sign and think that's your b value in future. So better safe than sorry, just write it out, yeah? Doesn't hurt to just take one more step. Then we're going to plug in 2 for the a, so I plug in 2 times 2, okay? Plus or minus, and then square root. Okay, and here's where I see a second mistake that kids always make. When I write the b squared, I write negative 6 twice. But when students make this mistake, here's what they write. They write negative 6 squared. So when they eventually work it out, they eventually put negative 6 times 6, which is negative 36. Yeah, because they don't realize that it's b squared, so you're actually multiplying negative 6 times negative 6. Okay, so the way I do it is I just make my students write negative 6 twice. Then that sign issue will never happen. Okay, but like I said, the way I usually tell my students is writing more is always safer. Yeah, doing more work in your head and skipping steps, yeah, that's good if you want to get speed, I guess, which is kind of important also. But it's gonna require you to be very, very meticulous. Yeah, like very pay attention to your details, basically. Okay, so let's plug in a 2 for the a, and then a 7 for the c. Okay, and then sorry, that a value kind of messed things up. It was in the way. Okay, and then I have 2a on the bottom, so 2 times 2. All right, so first step is usually the most important because you mess up here, your whole problem's wrong. Okay, so let's start cleaning things up. So my negative here turns into a positive, so I'll write that down to confirm that I took that into account. And then 6 up top and 4 on the bottom. And then you're going to say, oh, can't you just turn that into 3 over 2? Yeah, I could, but like I said, I don't like to do too many things at once because the more things you do in one step, it's harder to actually find where you went wrong if you eventually find yourself doing something wrong. Yeah, so make little changes each time. Yeah, you're not in a rush. It's not a race. Okay. Test time, yeah, it's kind of like a race because you want to finish. But when you're trying to practice and get a good foundation, just take your time. Okay. So negative 6 times negative 6, that's 36. And then minus 4 times 2 times 7, that's 56. All over 4. Okay, so I kind of wrote a little bit too much for the line, so let me just erase some of this part right here. I don't need it to be that long. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So now I can finally simplify 6 over 4. So what do they commonly divide by? Did you figure it out? 2. Well, I hope you said 2. So if I divide by 2 on top and bottom, I get 3 over 2. Okay. Then plus or minus, and up top I get negative 20, and on the bottom I get 4. Okay, so here's where the next big mistake happens. I usually always get kids say, oh yeah, negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. And they write negative 5 for that second fraction, which is super, super, super wrong, so please don't do that. Okay. Why can't you divide negative 20 and 5? Well, because negative 20 is inside the radical and 4 is outside the radical. So they're not allowed to interact because they're not in the same location, so to speak. Okay. So please don't think you can divide negative 20 and 4. That will be a very, very, very big mistake. So don't do that. Okay. You have to wait till numbers get circled. Yeah, when you find the pairs of them. And when these numbers get circled and go outside the square root, then if they can interact with the 4 because of common numbers or common factors, then you can simplify the fraction eventually, but you can't do it now. So please withhold that urge to do it. Okay? So let's simplify that square root negative 20. Okay, so we got square root negative 20, and I hope you remember the conversion I taught you guys the other lesson where I squared equals negative 1 because the opposite holds true, where negative 1 is known as I squared as well. Okay, so when I start breaking up this negative 20, I'm going to write I for the negative sign, and then 20 is going to be 2, 2, and 5. Okay, then I'm going to circle things that match because that's the only way to get things to come out of the radical symbol, or square root symbol rather. And when I see things that match, I circle them so they get permission to go outside the symbol. Okay, so 2 and I got permission. Did 5 get permission? And if he didn't get permission, why wasn't he given permission to go outside? Well, there's no circle around him. And why isn't there a circle around him? Because there was only one of them. Okay, so only pairs of numbers that match, yeah, or letters, can go outside the radical symbol when you simplify it. So I get 2i square root 5. Okay. All right, so this 2i root 5 is going to replace square root negative 20. Yeah. So let's get this replacing. So x equals 3 over 2 plus or minus, and then up top I get 2i root 5 over 4. Okay, so now I have a 2i on the outside. I have a 4 on the outside as well in the same fraction. So as long as I can divide by a common number, I can simplify something on the top and the bottom. So does 2 and 4 have a common factor? I hope you said yes. And if you said yes, I hope you say 2 is the common factor, because if you did, then you are absolutely correct. Okay, so first fraction stays the same, 3 over 2 plus or minus. And when I divide by a common number of 2, I get I root 5, because the 2 divided by 2, the common factor 2, becomes a 1. And when I divide the 4 by 2, the common factor, I get a 2. Okay, so there's your final answer. You can leave your answer as 2 separate fractions, or if you want to make it as one big fraction, that's fine also. Okay, so x equals 3 over 2, 3 plus or minus I root 5 over 2. So if you want to make it as one big fraction, that's perfectly fine also. Either way is fine. All right? Okay, thank you for joining me, and see you next time. Bye-bye.